Introduction. The Six-Day War of 1967 was a brief but decisive conflict between Israel and several Arab nations, including Egypt, Jordan, and Syria. Lasting just 6 days, the war resulted in significant territorial gains for Israel and established its military dominance in the region. The war also had far-reaching consequences for the Middle East, intensifying regional tensions and setting the stage for future conflicts. Context. The Six-Day War of 1967 had its roots in a complex web of political and historical factors that had been brewing in the Middle East for decades. One major factor was the ongoing conflict between Israel and its Arab neighbors over the issue of Palestine. The establishment of the State of Israel in 1948 had displaced hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, who had become refugees in neighboring Arab countries. Tensions between Israel and its neighbors were further fueled by a series of regional crises in the years leading up to the Six-Day War. In 1956, Israel had joined forces with Britain and France in an ill-fated attempt to seize control of the Suez Canal from Egypt. In 1964, the Arab League had formed the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, a militant group dedicated to the liberation of Palestine from Israeli control. In 1967, Egypt had closed the Straits of Tiran to Israeli shipping, a move that was seen as an act of aggression by Israel. The Six-Day War was also shaped by the broader Cold War context, with the United States and the Soviet Union vying for influence in the Middle East. Egypt, in particular, had aligned itself with the Soviet Union and received significant military and economic aid from Moscow. These factors, combined with the increasingly belligerent rhetoric of Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser, set the stage for the outbreak of war in June 1967. Israel feared an imminent attack from its Arab neighbors and launched a preemptive strike on June 5, 1967, which quickly escalated into a full-scale conflict. The battle. The Six-Day War of 1967 was a brief but intense conflict that saw Israel face off against several Arab nations, including Egypt, Jordan, and Syria. The following are some of the key details of the battle. Israeli air campaign. The war began with a preemptive strike by Israel on June 5, 1967. The Israeli Air Force launched a devastating attack on Egyptian airfields, destroying over 400 planes on the ground and achieving air superiority in just a few hours. Similar attacks were launched against Jordanian and Syrian airfields, further consolidating Israeli control of the skies. Ground offensive. With air superiority established, Israel launched a ground offensive against the Arab armies. The Israeli Defense Forces, IDF, quickly overran the Sinai Peninsula, which had been held by Egypt, and advanced into the West Bank, which was under Jordanian control. The IDF also captured the Golan Heights from Syria, a strategic plateau overlooking northern Israel. Urban fighting. The capture of East Jerusalem, including the Old City and its holy sites, was a particularly intense and emotional moment in the war. Israeli forces faced stiff resistance from Jordanian soldiers and Palestinian militants, and street-to-street fighting raged for several days. The IDF ultimately prevailed, and Israel took control of East Jerusalem, which it would later annex. Ceasefire. After just 6 days of fighting, Israel had achieved a stunning victory over its Arab neighbors. The conflict ended with a ceasefire on June 10, 1967. Israel had significantly expanded its territory, capturing the Sinai Peninsula, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights. Casualties. The Six-Day War was a relatively short conflict, but it resulted in significant casualties. Israel suffered around 800 dead and 2,500 wounded, while Arab losses were estimated at over 15,000 killed and 35,000 wounded. Aftermath and significance. The Six-Day War of 1967 was a pivotal moment in the history of the Middle East, with far-reaching consequences that continue to shape the region to this day. Here are some of the significant outcomes of the war. Territorial gains. The most immediate and obvious outcome of the war was Israel's capture of the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt, the West Bank and East Jerusalem from Jordan, and the Golan Heights from Syria. These territorial gains have remained a source of conflict between Israel and its neighbors, particularly the Palestinians, and have complicated efforts to find a lasting peace in the region. Military dominance. The Six-Day War established Israel as a dominant military power in the Middle East. Israel's swift and decisive victory over its Arab neighbors demonstrated the effectiveness of its military strategy and technology, and it raised the morale and confidence of the Israeli people. Israel's military dominance has continued to shape its approach to regional security and defense, and it has contributed to its status as a major player in global arms sales. Regional dynamics. The Six-Day War marked a turning point in Israel's relations with the Arab world. The war intensified Arab resentment towards Israel and created a lasting sense of injustice and humiliation among Arab populations, particularly the Palestinians. It also led to a hardening of attitudes on both sides and contributed to a cycle of violence and conflict that continues to this day. International diplomacy. The aftermath of the war spurred diplomatic efforts to resolve the Arab-Israeli conflict. The UN Security Council passed Resolution 242, which called for Israel to withdraw from the territories it had occupied in exchange for recognition and peace with its Arab neighbors. This resolution, along with subsequent efforts at diplomacy, has remained a cornerstone of international efforts to broker a lasting peace in the region. Religious significance. The capture of East Jerusalem and the Old City during the war was a significant moment in Jewish history, as it gave Jews control over the Western Wall, one of the holiest sites in Judaism. The capture of the Dome of the Rock, one of the holiest sites in Islam, also had religious significance for Muslims and contributed to tensions between Jews and Muslims in the region. Overall, the Six-Day War was a significant moment in the history of the Middle East, with far-reaching consequences that continue to shape the region today. Its legacy of territorial disputes, military dominance, and regional tensions has made it a key event in the ongoing struggle for peace and stability in the region. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like, share, comment, or subscribe, as it would be a great help and keep you notified of new content.